put yourself out there, because let's face it, success is messy and you are going to fail. Anyone who says that they're not, they're lying.
They're probably not very successful.
Exactly.
You can only be successful if you fail. As I think
Yes.
about my career, I might be the most successful person in the world with the volume of failures that I have had in my career.
Yep, 100%.
Welcome to the She's So Sweet podcast, where we interview accomplished women who have worked their way to the C-suite. I'm your host, Christy Falteruso, Chief Customer Officer and award-winning customer success executive. I am really excited for our guest today. This is my longtime LinkedIn bestie. Follow our content. Love to see all the wonderful things you're engaged with. But for today, we've got Randi Deckard, who is the SVP of Growth, newly evolving title at Besler. So Randi, welcome to the show.
So happy to be here and finally get to be a guest.
I love that when my listeners can kind of come on the other side of this and tell their story. And honestly, listen, I've been a big fangirl of yours and I follow all of your content. I watch all the things you're involved with. So I know today's episode is going to be a lot of fun.
Love it. I can't wait.
All right, so let's get in. Before we get started with all the good stuff, I want you to tell people about you, tell us your role, help us lay the foundation so we can navigate this together.
Sure. So I'm currently SVP of Growth, and that means sales, customer, and customer success and marketing. So basically end to end for the customer life cycle, which is my preference. If you have a leader who can own that, because I think you have better alignment. And I've had a very unique journey. I didn't start in business, which we'll get to as we kind of go through. But that's what I do, and I also advise startup companies. I'm currently a CRO advisor for Heart Health Community. Very passionate about health and wellness. So digital health startups are just a passion of mine.
I love that. No, tell us a little bit. What is Besler? Because I'm not familiar.
Yeah. So Besler is a healthcare finance company. And so we help hospitals in the U.S. who have very slim margins, although some people who are listening, maybe raising their arm at healthcare right now. But hospitals do have slim margins. So we help them recover revenue that would otherwise be lost, or protect reimbursement. And we have a software play. So we're TurboTax for hospitals. So everyone knows what TurboTax is. So we're TurboTax for hospitals and help them fill their tax report.
I love that. Okay. Super interesting, but I know that this is clearly not what you thought you'd be doing when you were little. And I only know that because we got to chat before we hit record. So you're going to go way back and you're going to tell me, when you were younger, Randi, what did you think or what did you want to do when you grew up?
I knew that I wanted to be an archaeologist. And when I say I knew, I saved up money, begged my parents to go see the Tutankhamun exhibit multiple times. I actually learned to, write the symbols. Like I studied them, like I needed to know them.
Okay, Randi, we went deep here.
I know. I was such a nerd. And it honestly, it wasn't until high school when I started researching schools. And first off, UCLA was one of the best schools for archaeology. I was in Canada at the time, and the cost of a Canada college versus, US is completely different. Number one, didn't have the funds. And then when I started researching like what it actually takes to be an archaeologist and what they're paid, I was like, yeah, that's not the path for me. I kind of had a bougie lifestyle that I wanted to live, and it was not going to happen that way.
It's very interesting how those things play out for us, right? And as I was telling you, like I tell my daughter all the time, like there's a lot of things you can do with the paths that you'd like to go down, but one thing I want you to consider is what is the lifestyle you want to live, right? Because if it is a fancy lifestyle, if you like things, you want to go out all the time, that all costs money. So got to consider that in your career path.
Yep. And I'm happy to say, though, just because I didn't take that path, it's still something that I really enjoy. Like we lived in Europe, and I used to go to the Louvre very frequently because it was like a train ride away, and they have a whole Egyptian section. So I would literally spend the day and like over and over in the Egyptian section. So you can still have your cake and eat it too. It just, it's a passion of mine.
Right. These things can become hobbies. They don't need to become careers. Okay.
Yes.
All right. All right. So now you're going to take me on this journey. So obviously you decided maybe that wasn't the path for you. What played out after that?
Right. So this is where, anyone who's, maybe in a place where they're not happy, you really need to lean in. So I was recommended by counselors because I was super smart. I was in the IB program. So, basically a STEM program where, it was math, physics, science, and it, took accelerated classes. So I was recommended to go into engineering. And the first year I was accepted into a quota program. There were 2 women in 2000 that were accepted to the program. And I was in mechanical engineering. My mom even spent like $500 way back when on the HP calculator. And after a year, it wasn't that I wasn't doing well. In fact, I was a mentor for people in math. Once again, total nerd. And, I tutored a lot of kids, I shouldn't say kids, young adults in calculus, et cetera, because to me, it was like just writing, just the way my brain works. But I just was like, I really don't see myself doing this. And, once again, went to counselors and they're like, well, here's some other sciences. So I tried pharmacology. I ended up in clinical research and, actually graduated with an advanced research degree and thought I was going to be a forensic pathologist, have 100 autopsies under my belt. And while I loved what I did, because it was very, very curious and just loved that aspect to it, my pathology mentor is like, Randy, what are you doing? Out of all the people that, could do this, have you thought about the commercial side of healthcare? Like, you need to be with people who actually
talk back to you. Yes.
You have so much dialogue. You have so much personality, and you can still use your skill set, but in a different way. And that was really my turning point. And I was fortunate enough to land a gig at a startup in North Texas that, guess who they sold to? Pathologists. Well, guess who knew pathologists? And I, that first year they said, can you do $1 million? Can you do 2? I'm like, yeah, I think I can. I can have a conversation with pathologists. Well, I sold 5. So I blew that number out of the water and got a team and have not looked back.
Wow. Okay. So do you feel like because you were a subject matter expert, because I have this debate with people all the time, do you think that being a subject matter expert was the catalyst to your success?
I think in that role it was. Is it necessary? No, because even when I hire, I always look for diverse hires because look, I took a sales role at a startup and had no sales experience, right? But what I look for is curiosity, willing to learn, okay with failing, pivoting, resiliency, grit. Those are like characteristics, because I can teach you an industry. I can teach you how to talk to an ICP. But if you're not going to show up and be willing to learn and be curious and, put yourself out there, because let's face it, success is messy and you are going to fail. Anyone who says that they're not, they're lying.
They're probably not very successful.
Exactly.
You can only be successful if you fail. As I think about my career, I might be the most successful person in the world with the volume of failures that I have had in my career.
Yep, 100%. And that's actually one of the things that, like the clinical science background really helped me with, is that resilience and grit, because I was taught to experiment. And to me, failure was just an experiment, right? And I was taught to try over and over again, but look at the data and what is the one lever I'm going to change. And when you take that to like the go-to market situation, that's why I was so successful, is because failure is just a word to me. because that's what I'm meant to do. I am meant to move forward and iterate to be better, period.
That is, I would have never connected that had you not said that, but you're so right. It's just it's like a required step in your process to find a solution, right? So it's like or I will say so many fear failure, it was so second nature to you. You probably didn't even think twice about it. It was just keep moving. Okay, great. We know that doesn't work. On to the next thing.
Yeah, I honestly, it wasn't until I started networking with other leaders and I, like imposter syndrome and all these things, came up. And I was like, oh, like it wasn't even on my radar because I thought this is just what you do. You experiment.
I didn't know I was supposed to feel bad about my failures. Wait, are we supposed to feel shame and embarrassment? I'm over here celebrating them very loud, very proud. That doesn't work, guys. That doesn't work. We're on to the next thing.
Yeah. And honestly, I had no idea, but that is, I think that is one of my greatest gifts of my background. And I talk all the time about, I call it the lab mindset or refinement loop, because what I have found is like some CEOs don't really like the word experiment, but they're okay with, we're going to design, this is the hypothesis, and this is what worked, and this is what didn't work, and this is where we're headed next, right? So sometimes I've had to reframe. It's kind of interesting, but yeah, I think that is a really key point to resilience is just scrub that definition of failure, because that's where the growth happens. Like you said, is when you fail, it's like, what did you learn from it and what are you going to do differently? That is where all the growth happens.
I love that. It's so funny. I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday as I was at the chief customer officer event in New York. And, I was speaking with a younger leader and she was like, well, tell me about your failures. And we're kind of like talking about this. And I was like, man, if I knew then what I knew now, I'd be so much more successful. And then like after our coffee and I go back and I'm sitting there thinking, and I'm like, that is so false. I'm only successful because I had those experiences, right? No one could have told me that. I couldn't have read it. It wouldn't have stuck. It wouldn't have had the impact, right? It's like your mother tells you, don't touch the stove because it's hot. I definitely needed to touch the stove to learn that it was hot so I wouldn't do it again. And so for me, that's the way I've been thinking about failure now is like, no, it was a required part of my journey in order to get where I am. And had I not had those, I definitely wouldn't be where I am.
100%. And even like when I was given a team to lead, I had some failures because even though I knew how to do it, I documented and I was able to train. One of the things that I learned as I went along is that not everyone can absorb and or go as quickly as I could as an individual, right? So I really had to learn more about change management and communication as I became a leader. And I admit some of my earlier teams, felt the rumbles of my learnings because I was used to going fast, right? Because it was just me. So, but I think I became a better leader through those evolutions. And thankfully, my team stuck with me, didn't hold it against me, but I learned I had to slow down, especially when it came to change management and communication.
Interesting learning. I mean, go back to people leadership. We'll talk about that in a moment because I feel like that's definitely a core learning that we all kind of have to lean into. But before we get there, I want you to kind of highlight for us, what were some of these big moments in your career as you think about them? Or like, what are the decisions that you made that really contributed to your success?
I think that the biggest thing that contributed to my success is, when I left like the clinical research and, lab pathology world, I had several people say, what are you doing? You were an administrative lab director. You've, put 15 years into this career. You have all this experience. You're crazy. Like, why would you do this? And I was like, but if I don't, then I'll be doing the same thing and I'm not happy. Right. And I think that I always said to myself, what's the worst thing that can happen? I'm like, okay, I go out and do this. I don't like it. I always have something to fall back on. Even today, I could go back to a lab because I'm, credited. I could do that, right? But I don't want to, but I could. And so I think that sometimes you have to bet on yourself. And I think every time I have bet on myself, I've grown more, and I'm happier because I tried, and there's been no regrets because I don't want to look back and go, oh, what would have been like if I tried that, right? And so I've changed industries. I went from commercial lab oncology to healthcare finance. I've done healthcare tech, and I would change again in a heartbeat. Because if it was something that I was passionate about, because like I said, I feel like you can learn. And if you don't put yourself out there, how are you going to grow? And so I just think that, not having regrets is one of the biggest learnings, and betting on yourself. And I believed in myself, not from a place of I know everything, but everything's figure outable, and I'm smart, and I'm going to surround myself with smart people, and I'm checking my ego at the door, and I'm okay asking questions and learning from other people and finding those people who've done this before to help me, and I will figure it out. There's nothing I can't figure out.
Let's talk about that, because I feel like this is something that people struggle with. And again, another conversation I had yesterday with someone was like, well, how do you learn, how do you figure out what your gaps are? And then how do you bridge that gap? And my response was like, you get really good at hiring. I'm like, because I don't need to learn everything at this stage in my career. I should be the intention isn't that I know everything. The intention is that I know what I don't know and that I hire well. So where in your career did you make that realization? And then how did you get past that to figure out like, okay, I need to just surround myself with these people so I can lean into that learning?
Yeah. So I actually feel like I learned that fairly early on, and I kind of had a leg up because when I was in the lab side, and especially like a director, I did have a team, but it was like different than go to market. And it was the same concept as that, when you build a team, you look for things that you don't have, and when you hire, what will complement like the team, right? So it's I forget the analogy about the weakest link in a chain, right? So you're always trying to look at like what is our team lacking, and when you're interviewing, what can we bring in? And as an example, when I was building my commercial team, I actually brought a project manager over to the commercial side because she was really good with clients. And I said, you could switch to account management with your project management background. I think you'll do really well. But what she brought to the team was discipline and the follow up, like project manager skills, right? And what is really crucial in go-to market? Well, when you're in sales and also customer success, the follow-up. So, and she taught all of us like really good ways to do that. That's just one example. And even now, like I lead marketing, but this is the one discipline in go-to market that I have never actually worked as an individual contributor. I just hired someone who is smarter than me, and I have an amazing team, and I lean on them because this is their expertise, right? I don't have to be an expert. That's their job. And we work together on common KPIs. I learn all the time from them. And that's okay. It's not my job to be an expert in that field. I just have to lead to get results.
I love that. Okay. So we're going to shift gears and go to I don't want to say sadder side of this, but I know that nobody gets where they are without having to overcome some obstacles and challenges. And I know that you and I, before we hit the record button, we talked about some of those. Hopefully they will come up in this story, but I would love for you to share with me, like, what were some of those big significant challenges or the obstacles that you had to face and overcome?
Yeah. So, in that first startup, my first boss was amazing. And as the company grew, I was shifted to another leader. And that was my first toxic female boss. And I had never had a boss who saw me as competition before. And that was really challenging because I had multiple promotions, and every promotion that I got, it got harder and harder to deal with this person and passive aggressive in front of people. And finally, I just made the decision I needed to go where I was celebrated, not tolerated, because this person also told me that when I applied for a VP of sales role, that I was not VP of sales material. And after that, I've sat in meetings with the male who got the role and was asked to do things that were under the VP of sales scope because I would get it done. And the team voted me MVP, and it was a unanimous decision. For the commercial team, I was like, I just need to go where I'm celebrated, not tolerated. And sometimes, I wrote a post about this. That's the bitter pill. I loved my team. I loved my customers. I loved the product. I really loved what I did. I just had a horrible boss. And unfortunately, that was something that I could not overcome. So I had to leave. And I'm happy to say I went on to be VP of sales twice. I'm SVP. I'm now a CRO advisor. It had nothing to do with me as an individual. Obviously you got to hold up the mirror. Is there something that's you, or is it the other person? In this case, it was OPO, other people's opinion of me, that I was like, no, I'm capable of this. And so, sometimes you just have to go somewhere else. And that's really hard. I wish that, my daughter and, future women don't have to deal with that. And that is one of the things that drives me as a leader. Is it is my job to support and lift and grow the next leaders, whether they be male or female. And I do have, a diverse team, male and female, but that actually taught me the boss that I didn't want to be. I did not want to be like that. I did not want my team to feel like that they didn't have a safe place, or that I was not going to support them as they wanted to rise in the ranks. So yeah.
Randi, I talk about this a lot to folks, but I always say you can learn as much from a bad leader as you can from a good leader. And sometimes it's just learning what not to do.
Yep.
And how not to behave. And so, very similar to you, I don't have one toxic female leadership story. I have a handful or so throughout my career. And it's always heartbreaking to me, because I'm like, man, when I needed a hand, you gave me a foot. And so it's just, I'm inspired by the fact that you use those lessons to be a different type of leader and lead from the front, and to show people what it is to be a real ally and a friend and a mentor, and, to help others grow. So good for you for doing that and not learning from that example. Because I will say, early in my career, I evolved into what I saw. And so I saw bad leadership, and I thought that's what it took to be a leader. And so instead of understanding that made me feel bad and that was prohibitive for me and my growth, I just thought that that's what leaders did. And I know that early in my career, I probably should have done a lot of things differently because I emulated what I saw. So I'm just really proud of you for seeing something and recognizing that was wrong and doing something different, because I think it's so easy to learn from that behavior and kind of continue the momentum behind something like that.
I empathize with your situation, because sometimes if you have never seen what good leadership is, that's like you don't know any differently, right? The boss prior was amazing, so supportive, let me run, didn't micromanage me, all the things. So that was like, holy heck, what just happened? But I put up with it for probably way too long. And I would just share for the audience that, you need to know where your boundaries are. And, at the time, because my husband was building a business, I was the primary breadwinner. And I probably stayed too long because I was the primary breadwinner while I was looking for that next thing and making that decision. But just know that it's okay to put yourself first. It's not selfish from a mental health perspective. No job is worth it, honestly.
I love that. What do you think it was that gave you the motivation to make the change. The She's So Sweet podcast is brought to you by Client Success. Client Success is an all-in-one customer success platform to help post-sale implementation and success teams manage customers from new to renew. Through an industry-leading platform approach, Client Success gives businesses an in-depth view into customer health, product usage trends, along with churn and risk data so that your team can not only retain customers, but help them grow as well. Whether it's managing customer onboarding workflows in shared portals, building custom health scores, tracking sentiment with NPS surveys, or doing more with less through AI and automations, Client Success gives customer success professionals a true one-stop platform to manage all aspects of the customer journey. To learn more about the industry's fastest to implement customer success platform, visit www.clientsuccess.com. That's Client Success. Simple, powerful customer success. There are a lot of people right now staying in very toxic roles under toxic leadership. And I think many of them feel like they're stuck because the market is not great right now.
Yeah.
They maybe are strong financial contributors to their household and they don't feel like they can take that risk. But what was the thing that for you recognized and said, no, you know what, I need to make this change? Because I want people to see that in themselves in their own journey.
Yeah. Well, I'm not proud of this, but I distinctly remember the day that I closed the door to my office and blubbered like a 3-year-old baby who someone had taken away their favorite toy because she had made some very passive aggressive comments in front of my peers. And I was so stunned in the moment. I should have just got up and left the meeting, but I took it. But I walked into my office and I just bawled because I was like, that was the straw. And I remember it so distinctly because it took me a good 30 minutes of crying and then having to go to the bathroom. And I'm an ugly crier, like the red splotchy face,
Same.
cold, and I literally came back to my desk and used company time and computer, just saying. And I literally changed my status on LinkedIn to open that very moment and just made that decision, like, no more. This was enough. It was not worth it. Like, my heart was racing. I literally, and that's what why I wanted to mention the mental health. Like, that was my signal. What are you doing? What are you doing? Like, it is not worth it. And, after I'd left, I had colleagues reach out and just say, I did not realize how much you protected us because once you left, like, they got exposed to it directly.
Right.
So you sometimes the boss, you can't remove the boss, you have to remove yourself.
Oh man, that story hits home because I almost feel like I lived the exact same situation. And sadly, I know that we're not the only ones. So I hope that folks that are listening can find it in themselves to figure out what those boundaries are and create them and lean into them. Okay. Well, now while we can sit here and talk about all of the bad things, I'm sure we all have laundry lists of those. I think that women don't do enough to celebrate their success, right? Especially ambitious women, which tends to be the quality of the guests that are on my show, is that they're all very ambitious. And so that means we're on to the next thing, right? We have this success and then we don't even spend the time it deserves to celebrate it and talk about it because we're already focused on 4 things that we got to go do next. So this is your time, Randy. I want you to look back at your career. What were some of the most successful moments for you or the things that you are the most proud of over your years?
So there are a few things. And, the first is just, stepping away from, the career that I had built initially and moving into the unknown. I'm really proud of myself for, like, you can do this and you don't want to have regrets. That may not seem as momentous to some people, but, making that pivot and reinventing yourself, it taught me a lot about myself and that I really can do anything. And so that's one of the things I'm most proud of. And then the next is just as I've evolved, I realized that I want my legacy to be the impact on others. And that's really why I chose the leadership route, is because you get to impact more people. And as I've gotten older, it's like, okay, I'm impacting the people in my organization or on social media. And in the last 18, 24 months, have really ramped up my personal brand. And I said, hey, I want to start speaking more. And I mentioned to someone, I'm going to start with podcasts because that seems like the easiest way to speak. And my goal is, let's see if I can get on 3 podcasts. Well, that first year I recorded 40. And as you know, sometimes a podcast recorded, but it doesn't come out.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I guess I set the bar kind of low trying to get on 3 podcasts because I didn't know what it took. Right. And I'm happy to say that, I've had panel opportunities, some virtual SCOs. I have a paid speaking engagement coming up in the fall in Toronto. And, I just keep putting myself out there. And because I do want my legacy to be, impacting other people. And, the beauty of social media now is that the barrier to entry is so low.
Right.
And right now I'm using LinkedIn as that medium. I don't have a website yet. It's in the works, but, I'm just really proud of myself that I'm ramping up still that portion because that's something I'm very passionate about. And just like this right here, it's once again an opportunity to make an impact. And if it's just one person, that has a ripple effect, right?
It definitely does. Okay, so I also know this to be true for a lot of people because I get asked this, and I'm sure you do too. How do you start building your brand? Because this is obviously something you decided probably very intentionally that you were going to lean into it, and obviously made it a focus. You set some goals for yourself. I talk to people all the time that don't know where to start. They're petrified, and I offer advice, but I'm interested in hearing what advice you offer.
Yeah, so I always talk about it in 2 ways. One is, we're always evolving to the person that we want to be, right? And that's always in constant flux. So keeping that in mind, where were you 3 to 5 years ago, or even 10? But I think 3 to 5 years ago is easier. And how could I help that person? And that's really my legacy, is that I know that I'm still like I want to speak, I'm writing a book. It's about leadership, growth mindset. So I can really help people who are 3 to 5 years behind, either thinking about that transition, stuck, or wanting to take a leadership journey, right? So that's how I think about it. And I'm curious how you think about it.
Okay. So I take a different approach, but I love your advice there. So my first thing is always asking people, why? What's your objective? And if your objective is selfish, you're never going to be able to develop a true brand and a legacy, because it is about selfless giving. And it took me a long time to not be the gatekeeper of my knowledge, right? I used to think that if I gave somebody everything I knew, that they would have some competitive advantage over me, instead of recognizing the fact that the more you give, the more you grow. And it's that whole concept of rising tides. So my first thing is like, what's your why? And if your why if it's rooted in a selflessness reason, organically, you're going to be able to do this very successfully. And my second thing is, well, what's your why not? Why aren't you doing this today? And then I preface it by saying, everything you say is an excuse. So go ahead, tell me, answer the question, but just so you know, it's just an excuse. To your point, the barrier to entry is so low. And I tell people, I'm like, listen, get out of your own way. LinkedIn is funny like this. You have how many, maybe if you have 500, 1,000 connections on LinkedIn, you're going to put a post out there and maybe you get 100 impressions. So you don't have to worry about the world seeing it and going viral. Right. So just get something out there and start building that muscle behind your social sharing and your storytelling. And eventually you'll be so comfortable that when you do build an audience, it'll be so organic and you'll just be at a place where the stories will kind of sell themselves and you'll grow.
And I love that. And one thing that I would add is, especially if you're using something like LinkedIn or any other social media and you're not seeing a lot of engagement, I've had posts from, 18 months ago that somehow someone has tripped across and they've slid into my DMs and commented how it impacted them. And, that for me is telling me what I'm doing is important because someone took the time to engage, write me and say, this is how it impacted them. Right. And I always say, you're only a conversation away. And sometimes that conversation is like a text or DM or engagement, but you're only a conversation away from that next thing. But if you don't put yourself out there, you will never know. And honestly, once again, talking about barrier to entry, LinkedIn, is just so easy. It's how I experiment. Like I put out some of my ideas and see what's resonating. And it's one way to test for my book, some of the chapters I'm writing, etc. It is just my playground. I absolutely love it.
But think about all like the great friends you've made, right? But I watch your LinkedIn, right? And so these aren't virtual friends that you're collecting. These are real people that you're building real relationships with. I watch you. I see all the photos. I have such FOMO when I see all you people get together. And I'm like, I want to be there. And so you also do a great job of translating that into real relationships. What I think that's the real crux of it as well, right? It's not just how many followers am I collecting? How many likes do I get? But the real reason we're doing this is to build a real community of folks that are going to allow us to learn and grow together.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you brought that up because it is about showing up as your authentic self and you will attract, people who, you don't have to be for everyone. I actually have a hat that says I'm not for everyone.
That took me a long time to get over, Randy. I mean, I think, okay, you might have to send me a link. You might have to send me a link because I tried to be for everybody and I killed myself, right? Like how many times I've cried because one person didn't like something I said or didn't agree with me. And then I was like, wait a minute. You don't have to. Right. So don't even get me started on the whole Mel Robbins, let them.
Yes.
Because, all right. So go. Tell me.
Yeah. So I was going to say, I'm not for everyone. And I always say OPO, other people's opinion. I show up who I am and if I'm not for you, next. And that is just a great way to qualify. And I think that I know who I am and what I stand for and what I want to accomplish. And like I said, I realize I'm not for everyone, but it is not transactional, right? That is where I think people miss is you have to put yourself out there and engage in these conversations, whether it's virtual or in person and, create these authentic connections and relationships. And I can literally go to any city globally and find people. I'm telling you, I can do it. And I can have coffee, drink, dinners, go to a play, whatever. And I think that's the beauty of what I do and of social media. And like I said, your tribe finds you.
I love that so much. And so hopefully we've given some advice and guidance to folks who haven't made that investment into themselves and their network yet, because we all need to kind of take that into our own hands. Now, I think this is a great segue because I know part of what I see you do on LinkedIn is empowering other women. Mm-hmm. And that's something that obviously is something that really resonates deeply with me as somebody who follows you. But I love the saying, empowered women empower women. So I want you to share with us, what are some of the things and ways that you're giving back to the female community?
Yeah. So I have been in some official mentor programs, but honestly, I am mentoring just on my own, some people, local people in Dallas, as well as I have a few other peeps, around the globe. And that is one way. I am always, if I see something, I will slide into someone's DM, how can I help? Or will give them resources. And, some of the comments that I get, and this is where, my heart is full because I'm not doing this expecting anything back. But when you do that and people do, like, you don't know what this meant to me, and they come back, like, that's why we do what we do, right? Is so we can lift up others. And I always, that quote about be the change you want to see, is just something that, has stuck with me. And then my grandmother raised me is that kindness costs nothing. And
I love that.
I have 30 minutes for anyone, anytime to help them. You can always find time, and sometimes it's only 15 minutes, but you can find time, whether it's making that introduction, looking at a resume, just having that conversation. And like I said, but that's not being transactional, that's being authentic.
Oh my gosh. I almost feel like that's a beautiful way to end, but we're going to keep going because I have a few more questions, Randy. But like that was like that would have been a solid way to wrap up. I can't let it end there because I want more selfishly. All right. So I do, like, obviously you also have this innate kind of growth mindset. And I think it kind of even goes back to just where your career started, your education started, your entire journey kind of feels very deeply rooted on having a growth mindset. Obviously, I like to assume that, like, as leaders, the good ones are always learning, right? And we have a commitment to that, to ourselves. How are ways that you invest in your own personal growth?
Yeah. So I am 100% nerd, serial learner. I just have always been that way. Like, I love to read. I'm just extremely curious. So I not only invest dollars, but time. On a yearly basis to my professional and personal development. And I'm always holding up the mirror. How can I be 1% better every day? And for anyone who follows Tony Robbins, I took my son to a UPW event in Dallas when he graduated from high school. We both walked on fire. And Tony has a saying, 1% better every day. And that's kind of like the mantra that I live by. And, as a go-to market professional, 18 months ago, I really dove into AI. I have 100 custom GPTs I've built. I learned how to automate. I've taken courses. There isn't a month that goes by I haven't read a book or taken some type of course, whether it's a webinar, whatever. And yes, I get professional development dollars, but I also spend money. And I feel like if you want to be a good leader and grow, you have to invest in yourself. And I never look at it as an expense. I have increased my income over and over because I have continued to upskill myself. And I just think it's like important to always be learning. ABL. I have so many acronyms. But anyways.
You should open up your own t-shirt line that just has all of your little sayings on.
Funny that you say that.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah. So, I have a book coming and I've been testing some Randi-Sue-isms, because I also want to do some merch. And, I have another side business that I hope it's okay, to kind of let a somewhat naughty word slide here, but it's
anything you got, Randy.
Yeah. So I have a side business that I'm working on. It's called bottlebitches.com. And it's for snarky women who like to drink wine because, over the course of my professional career, my girlfriends and I have got together and had our snarky moments. So I've collected all these sayings. And so I have some merch that's in the works for that as well.
I love it. Well, you're going to have to let us know when it is readily available.
Yes.
I could tell by this conversation, there's already a few things that I would add to cart. So I'm super, super excited to support that endeavor. All right, Randy, well, listen, before we wrap up, I want to make sure that we're leaving everybody with like one piece of advice. It's always my favorite way to end. So before we wrap up, what's the one thing you think it's important for my listeners to hear?
Success is messy, and no one should dictate your journey or your happiness. Only you get to define that.
Oh, so I love that. That is a powerful way for us to wrap up today. So Randy, thank you so much for your time today and sharing your story. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I cannot wait for your book. I even more so can't wait for your merch because as a shopper, I like a witty hat, shirt, mug. So if you need ideas on like where you should put these sayings, I'll give you some ideas, but I want all of the stuff. But so excited to just be able to share your journey with our listeners, and thank you so much for selflessly giving us your time today.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was so much fun.
Oh, awesome, Randy. Thank you so much. Well, for those of you listening, if you enjoyed our episode, please rate and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, subscribe on YouTube, connect with us on LinkedIn. Until next time, we'll see you soon. Hi guys, I want to share a bit about an organization that I support called Wednesday Women. They're on a mission to increase the visibility of executive women leaders that you should know, learn from, and be inspired by. On LinkedIn, they share the profile of 2 amazing women each week, on Wednesdays of course. And now just imagine if we all followed, amplified, and nominated the women that we want to see more of. Their initiative provides examples of women CEOs, founders, sales executives, technical leaders, and so many more. By supporting Wednesday Women, you'll see more of these professionals in your social feeds, of course, but also on stages, podcasts, and panels. If you're interested in learning more and supporting their initiative, head over to www.wednesdaywomen.org or follow them on LinkedIn.